off by introducing yourself, tell everyone what you do, and give us a little bit of insight into how it's been being on the front line.
So what I do is I'm an anaesthetic trainee, and at the time that the first wave came about, I happened to be doing anaesthetics at an East London hospital, like a lot of my colleagues, because anaesthetics and intensive care, the drugs are the same, machines are the same. We were naturally a cohort that were redeployed. It's not to say so we were the only people deployed. People came from everywhere and from all walks to help out in any way they can. So I was just one of the group of people that sort of went across to help, and it was fortunate that had happened at a place where I'd done intensive care before, so sort of not as sort of stress for me. So I knew a bit about how intensive it worked, and I was comfortable with my environment. Lots of people who turned up, rolled up their sleeves, but were in a completely unfamiliar. And the way I would think about it is, if I had to suddenly become a Christian and look after kids when I'm involved with adults, I would, like, pardon my French, but I would shit the bed. People didn't necessarily show that level of concern. They just rolled up their sleeves and got on with it. So the pandemic, so the first wave, everyone knows how it went, and everyone knows how healthcare workers feel, because it's thankfully well documented. But during that time, I think about the first 2 or 3 months went, and then things started to simmer down. And where we had started, I mean, I knew a lot of the people I was working with, but we had formed new friendships, and we were now working with people that we'd never worked with before, but there was definitely a feeling of closeness all the way from the consultants in intensive care, down to the cleaners, down to the sort of surgical consultants, the sexual health consultants that come along to come and do phoning the families and all the various. Suddenly we were like this family, because we'd been through it together, and we'd been through something quite horrible. And I think the main thing about it was the number of hours we were working, combined with the amount of death we were seeing every day. And so there was a definite feeling of camaraderie, and I was seeing in the news about how hard things were, and the odd person talking about what they were experiencing, but it was quite generic. It was, intensive care is really tough right now, it's really sad, and sort of, we know that was a party line, but actually around me there were loads of individual stories, individual struggles, moments of triumph, and also misfortune. And I think I had this overwhelming feeling of, these are stories that need, the stories that I heard. Everyone had come in with their own angle, but sort of doing the same thing roughly, but from different views, vistas. And I guess what I wanted to do is document that in a creative way. I also realised that I'd put things into a little black box in the back of my mind, and I hadn't started to think about what I was going through, or process it, because doing that, putting it in a little black box, allows you to carry on, providing, giving. I think that's a good defensive reflex that loads of people show in loads of different careers or sort of moments in their life. You tuck things away to do later, I think. And so in that process, I was starting to think about things, how the same feeling was in the room. People wanted to talk, but how do you tell people that have been through the same thing how you feel? Because you almost assume that they know, and that you're burdening them with, I can't think of an example, but you're telling someone who knows what it's like, and that might be good because they get it, but also you
don't want to add to the load
going through it. So I came up with the idea of helping people reflect, and actually I thought, why don't I start taking pictures of people at work? The aim was to take, initially it was one of my friends, and I was like, I'm thought of this idea, can you be the first person I take a picture of? And we walked around like, where can we do this? We'd finished the shift, I was like, where can we take a picture? What's symbolic of what you've gone through? And it was the picture of my friend James, who's got the FFP mask, the respirator, and he's sat on a theatre table. Now a theatre or sort of the operating room isn't where you would normally have an intensive care patient, but one of the worst first way was that's where we put people because there were anaesthetic machines acting as ventilators. So he sort of sat down there and we took that image, and I think that's one of the most sort of powerful images I've taken, which is just him far away, sort of a poorly lit theatre, and that's how it felt when we were in there. I knew what he was sort of thinking perhaps when he was sat there and what that represented. And so it went from there. So I just started asking people to send their thoughts, what they felt about working through. Some were really positive, some were negative, some were in between. But everyone had a say, everyone had something to say. And I would only take a picture if they promised to do that, and then I would wait for them to send me something, and then at some point, what they'd, with their permission, share what they'd said. And people that you like, people are amazing writers, talking about their own emotions. It was like really, sometimes I was reading it and I was like, damn, I can't believe I get to be the first person to see what this person's saying. And so the initial to just share that, and then I spoke to a couple and someone called Jess who at the Metro was particularly interested in that type of story, which was because they've got the biggest readership in the UK, so that was exactly what we needed, and that was really well. I got to she sort of particularly interested, I felt, so I got to the same catharsis that my colleagues and friends got writing to me. I got to do that about the project and what I'd gone through. And I think, sort of, sorry to ramble on, but the thing that was most amazing about the whole thing was a lot of people, 2 months to send me something. Some people still haven't been since last year, May or June. They keep saying, I don't know how to put it in words. Yeah. It took days. But the people that took long or didn't say the same sort of thing came of it, which was something like, I cried writing it because it brings to this things that weren't simmering before. And, they were saying that they found it cathartic. It was a release. It was a reckoning with their own emotions. So, that was good. I felt like I did something there for colleagues. And then second wave, I wanted to show more action shots. I wanted to show actual care being given. So I used the opportunity with the trust that I used to work with before, where I did the first project. They were kind enough to let me go in on an off day, but to walk around taking pictures, which was a creative thing, quite difficult because you can't get permission from people that are asleep. They're awake, they're often 2 on 1, really give you permission to take their photo. So you need to find a way of creatively covering any part of them that is noticeable or could be identified, showing intensive care. So that was tricky, but sort of pushing into a bit more of what I might want to do long term. So yeah, that was really good. And then the same thing happened again with the Metro, and we spoke about how he felt now. And I've always been quite apprehensive about being too honest about how things are, especially if they verge on political. But I think I owed it to myself and my colleagues we were feeling and how frustrated we were that we were back in the same position. We were thrust wave again, because the first time it was like, yeah, this is our job, this is what we do it for. The second time we were tired, we were exhausted, and I spoke about some of the mental health and some of the evidence or growing evidence of various or some form of trauma that people are experiencing working in these jobs. So I got to talk about that, and that's where we are. So yeah, sorry, I probably rambled on for a bit, but
no, not at all. It's fine. You've saved me. I'm here to listen from you. You've saved me asking you the questions, and it's just so profound that in such crises you were able to come with not a solution but a coping strategy to help both your well-being and the staff's. And I just think it's amazing that you even had that kind of light bulb moment to think, oh, I'm going to do that, and it's actually going to be a reflective way for them to help work through the really traumatic things that they've experienced that have been too challenging to just bring up to one another at a work shift, because it's just not been appropriate. You're putting patients first constantly. So I think you've done such a service to them, and I'm glad you were able to get that reciprocal when you spoke to the Metro as well. I think that's also really profound.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things we had was something called Coffee Club, and it was on Tuesday mornings, and we were there. We were doing 4 shifts of nights, and then a few days off, 4 shifts of long days off, and it was like a sort of cycle or 16-day cycle. So we were in on Tuesdays a lot, either because you were handing over to the day team or you were receiving a handover. There's a psychiatrist at the trust I work with, amazing, and he's so perfect for his job because he just sort of, I don't know how he gets the room to open up about things no one wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Listening kind of, and that was quite good. And I think maybe the idea stemmed from that, but the thing that was happening at these coffee clubs was the same 5 people talking gobshites like me, and actually there were opinions or thoughts in the room that from the more introvert people or people that didn't feel like they could say anything that needed to be heard. And that's what being able to go away and think about what you want to say and then writing something sort of provided a lot of people.
And so going back to what you were saying about you and your colleagues just being absolutely exhausted with the second wave and having to relive it all over again, do you feel that the act of taking photographs and creating the community around reflection and, you know, this sense of camaraderie that you have really brought with the act of collecting these photographs has actually energized you? Has it made you feel any less sense of mental exhaustion because of the creative outlet you've created for yourself?
If I'm honest, it's a mixed bag. I think initially I was excited about it, something positive from something bad, you know, and I felt my flatmates, who were my closest friends, were really encouraging about it. They thought it was a really good idea, and where I was like a bit random and a bit, you know, and they were like really encouraging. The photographs are great and really pushed me to get it out there. And so I felt really positive about it. And I picked up a camera about 3 or 4 years ago because of wanting a creative outlet. I think being behind a camera gives you a lot of solitude. I'm not creative in any other way. I was bad at art, I was bad at music, you know, but I think taking pictures is easier than all of those things. And I think it gave me something where I could be behind a camera on my own in an environment, a bit of solitude. I think the thing that I always used to say is, until you pick up a camera trying to take pictures, you don't realise some of the sort of nuanced beauty around you. And when you, in the same way at work, which is a really sterile environment, if you look at it, it's corridors of white light with white walls, disgusting reflective, like, you know, flooring. But actually, you put a story in and you put a situation and, you know, try and work with some of the light, and you actually get something powerful. So it was both creative at work. Sort of people I took pictures of were really patient with me because I'm not an expert. And I was learning as I was going, if I'm honest. I enjoyed that, and it was cathartic in its experience. It was good to hear for me how people were feeling, and I think people at work were reading their colleagues' messages and they were encouraging each other, and you can see on the comments that you're great, you're amazing. And I thought that was really, there came a point after, I don't know what to do with this. I think people are sick of COVID, but they're also sick of hearing about it. That might be in my mind, but if you look at some of the comments that I'm making on Twitter or the articles I've written, they're sort of like, well, you know, you're the one that wants to do the job. What did you think you'd sign up for? And you start to get the feeling that actually no one wants to hear this anymore, but there's definitely people that it reverberates with, and that's really who the project's for. It's about being able to find something difficult and talk about your experience and getting it out there. So it was good for me, good for people. And also, I think, like, that day that your picture comes up, someone's indirectly celebrating you.
Yeah.
You are, and your cause and what you've contributed. It's not to take away from anyone else who hasn't a picture, because you represent all of those people. And it's often by chance or / whoever will let me take a picture that they ended up on my Instagram or whatever. But they represent so many of their colleagues all at the same time. You mentioned she's part of a team that never worked in critical care, who's turned up midway through a degree and got on with it, and actually does some of the hardest and most important work, which is a lot of the running around, a lot of like getting things to where they need to. And on top of that, talking to families, really anxious families who you've never met, don't know the faces of, who are sitting by the phone all day. And it's people like Tally and her colleagues who are phoning people up and saying, your brother, your mother, son has gotten a bit worse today, or the person you were going to marry in July this year has gotten a bit worse and don't know how it's going. And it's saying the same tagline to everyone so that no one's too hopeful. And those are the sort of, you know, these people represent everyone that's in those situations. So yes, it was cathartic, it was good, it was a release, but there are also definitely points where I was like, actually, people are sick of hearing this.
Yeah.
Or crux of the message, we're sick of it and we're tired and we're working beyond what we're meant to be doing or what we're trained to do. And that, I think that's the nature of the NHS.
Yeah. No, I think what you've drawn upon, so just first, shout out to Tally, because God forbid if I was one of the patient's family members having to receive horrible news, that would be a face that I would want to receive it from, because she is just an absolute delight. So shout out to her, because I know she's on this right now. But I think what you've touched upon, which I find really moving, is this shared humanity that photography and art brings. That yes, COVID was unbelievably devastating, but it's actually united so many people and kind of caused the hierarchy within healthcare to flatten. So you talk about how the cleaners and the consultants and the nurses and the doctors, they were all mucking in together. And I think the medium that you're able to actually show this camaraderie, despite, you know, your role and what, you know, whatever standing you come from, is amazing that you've done it through art and through having actual records of all these different people brought together in a collection. And it really reminds me of, you know, all the Humans of New York photography series that happen and all the other ones that have come from that, where you're just showing the human experience. You're saying there is suffering, there is tragedy, there's celebration, there's, you know, the small wins, there's the tragedies. And I just think it's so great that you managed to actually have this initiative within such a crisis. Like, I'm still trying to understand how did it come to you? How did you find that kind of light bulb moment and just run with it when you were probably, like, presumably going through a really hard time yourself?
I don't know. I think it was like mix of not knowing what to do. I'm off, having a distraction, like sort of taking photos when you're at work is sometimes a bit awkward. I didn't necessarily love that bit because you draw a lot of attention to who you're doing it with. But after, you know, I spent people probably find it weird how long I spent looking at their faces and like editing, trying to get the best, try and create some of the dramatic photos with their image to help tell the story that they're probably going to write to me. And so if you imagine on my 4 days off, I was like bored, stuck in a hotel room, like don't know what to do. There's only so many times you can go for a run, supermarket. So it was a way of sort of something to focus on, and it just came to me off of that idea of we all want to reflect, we all want to sort of share our story. There's pages that are sort of way bigger than mine on Instagram that thing like Humans of COVID-19, which I recommend people follow, and various other things. And there's also pages that have tried to take photographs that were doing intensive care, and they've been really good as well. And I think it's not a unique thing by any stretch of the imagination. It was nice to be able to do it for the pocket of people that I sort of experience that thing with. So it was quite nice.
And I mean, as cliched as it is to say, like, from what I'm sensing happened with people coming forward about their story when they were finding it hard to kind of discuss on a day-to-day, is, you know, photography allows for that reflection, and it's the whole "a picture is worth 1,000 words." And so I just wanted you to just tell us a little bit more about the responses and reactions you had from your colleagues when you've initially asked them to do this, and the reflective piece that you were asking of them. What was the reaction, and then what did it mean to them once you had the final product?
I think because I knew them, people were more forthcoming. It might be if a random person came along, but also people were like, "What do you mean you're taking pictures?" Because they just know me as my colleague or my friend or whatever. So I was fortunate that a few people were willing to just try it out with it and listen to the pitch. But I did have to pitch to a lot of people. But not everyone wanted to do any version of Limelight or wanted their picture taken or didn't necessarily feel like their story was worth telling and so forth. So I just said that this was an idea. I'd like to take your picture because I've worked with you and you've contributed to this crisis with it, and I think it would be good if you also reflect. And I think I'd like to combine all of this together so we have something, almost like a diary of what we all went through. And I just said we can take the picture however you want, sort of ideally in work clothes or whatever, wearing what you want. You can pose however you want. But I wanted to reflect how you feel about the whole thing. And so some people are smiling, some somber. But yeah, loads of people took convincing, and sometimes it didn't necessarily work or for them per se. And a lot of people said they absolutely didn't want it. And obviously there were a few people that were like, "Oh my God, take my picture." So yeah, that's how it came about. It was really good of people to even be involved because there's a lot of trust that goes into that. I'm taking a picture of someone, they share personal words with me, and so I felt like I had a bit of a responsibility to do something with it that was positive and good. And like I said earlier, I had close friends and people that were quite supportive about the whole process and sort of said going, because it was the kind of thing that easily could have gone well or something that could have almost happened. So that was a good thing about it.
And so what do you think in general about creative outlets and the link between mental well-being? Is this something that you just stumbled upon by following your intuition of, I'm going to pick up my camera, I can't, like you said, can only get as many endorphins from 1 run, 2 runs a day, whatever, and go and shop for my food for dinner tonight? What was the link for you between finding out, oh, I'm into photography, I may as well kind of do it to get a kind of sense of well-being and purpose?
I mean, my answer isn't going to be very good because there wasn't a big thought process behind it.
But was your intuition? It was like your creative juices just,
I was just trying to distract myself and maybe by accident distract other people. I think that's what it was. There's nothing to do. This is a once in a lifetime thing that we're all going through and something we'll all remember for a long time. An opportunity to document it. It's an opportunity for me to be distracted and maybe be creative. Some of the pictures I've taken, and if you think about it, like for every good picture you take, there's about maybe 20 or 30 bad ones, at least for me anyway. Some of the pictures I've taken are sort of like, did I take that? And sort of it comes from the person that you're taking a picture of and sort of that individual moment and sort of both people working off each other. And that felt good. And it's sort of, in hindsight, creativity as an outlet was amazing. But at the time, it was just a distraction. It was just, yeah, this is something that could be positive. And there were definitely people that really got behind it that sort of helped me down that line, because I could have easily thought about it, go like a lot of things that people let go when they think of it because you think it's a silly idea. So I definitely felt like I was putting myself out there, but the same way people had to put themselves out there. So it wasn't a clever thought process. This will really help me. It was literally, I need something. Maybe these guys do too.
And now that it obviously it wasn't a clever thought process, it was just coming from intuition and what you felt you needed to do at that time, which I think is even more remarkable. But do you feel like now that you've done it, it's something that you will kind of factor into like your own self-care, like when we come out of this, like will you make more time for creativity? Like how was creativity already placed within like your kind of day-to-day routines?
So I think definitely, with some encouragement from people and sort of making that mental space and time for doing it, this is definitely something that I want to do forever. And because I don't think the heartache or the frustration, anger, and all of those negative feelings that come off COVID have gone away from. And it has definitely been a good thing. But in the same way that something can be good, it can cause pressure. We all do things that overall are things we want to do, like, for example, a career in medicine, whatever career that we do, or running a marathon. But there's a point where suddenly that wanting to do it so much and actually wanting to be good at it can be pressure. So I think just balancing those two things, using it in a positive way, but also not letting it become a thing that actually becomes negative, will be the way. And I sort of, I don't particularly mind if it stays as a hobby, but what would be really fantastic is if it could be something that I decide, because there's so many stories to tell. There's also a lot of photographers, but I think the unique thing that I have is, or that someone doing something like this has, is that I'm working in healthcare. I'm also around a lot of patients who all have individual stories, so maybe to do something like that, and that makes me feel quite positive. I feel good about that than I about my career, which could be a sign of the times, or it could just be that I really love sort of that interaction with someone where they're vulnerable and they're letting you take a picture of them, and you're trying to get that angle, but at the same time you also get the opportunity to hear something really personal about them, and it adds so much, so much to the image itself. So yeah, I think take time for it when it works, and there might be times.
And so you obviously touched upon it, but what would be your ultimate vision, or are you just kind of still going along with the process of, all the brilliant work you've done so far, or do you have a vision of where you'd like it to go?
I think in an ideal world, if you look at some of the best portrait photographers in the world, or the ones that take photographs for Nat Geo, they take these amazing, vivid images of people that are at margins of society, and you don't even need to read what's underneath, and often the caption's beautiful, but you just tell from the image what. And I think that's an amazing job. It's incredibly cool. I think it facilitates travel, and it looks at the surface really enriching. I think if you try and combine that with a career like medicine, you can end up not necessarily getting those opportunities. So there's got to be some middle ground that I can approach, and maybe something like that in the future would be amazing. And I think that right now, I wouldn't call doctors marginalised, but there are definitely patients. And I think moving from healthcare professionals eventually to patients might be a nice thing. The idea of frontline work initially might have extended beyond health. What is a frontline worker? What are the vital, human resources and stuff? I don't know, but that could be a story. Ultimately, I think the most exciting thing is I don't really know. We'll just see where it goes, and I feel I've got a foundation here, and I can tell quite personal stories for people, with people, in a professional or at least sort of nice way, and do some justice to them. So that's where I would want.
So I think you've just said something, probably without even realising, but it's very enlightening that you've just said, I don't mind where it really goes. I don't really know. That's what's exciting. And I think that's really reflective on COVID in itself, and how it has just been one big bundle of uncertainty. And you use the arts as a means of distraction during such a kind of whirlwind of, am I coming, am I going, is it getting better, is it getting worse? Like, I can't even imagine the displacement that you felt in the last year. Like, I'm a final year medical student, and I can't say I've been on the front line by any means, but I've observed senior colleagues and the things that they've been going through, and the stories they've been telling me. So I just think what you've just said just completely encompasses the power, the transformative power of the arts, that it can allow you to have some sort of grounding, some sort of purpose, help your well-being, even in times of uncertainty. And I just wanted to touch upon that. That was really brilliant. And I wanted to ask you, where do you sit? So everyone always says, quite cliched, medicine is an art and a science. And you're obviously an anaesthetist, you're an anaesthetics trainee. There we go, got my words out. So to me, anaesthetics is, you know, so sciencey because it's all the like physiology and all the different chemicals and all the different like anaesthetic drugs that you make up. But you obviously are someone who has a hobby that sits within the arts. So where do you sit personally within the idea of medicine as a science and an art? And like, you know, what kind of examples can you bring to the table?
You'd ask someone better this question, because I wouldn't even know how to argue for it being an art. I think there's huge overlap. I think both need a lot of precision, a lot of skill. A lot of these things, and both of these things require time. And I think where there's less of an overlap is, I guess, with art or pure art, you have the option of going with it and doing what you want with it and letting your creativity run free. That is an expression of creativity, I suppose. So that doesn't always happen with medicine, but if you try to tell a plastic surgeon that what they do is an art, or a psychologist who's able to sort of deconstruct the mind, come up with something positive that it isn't an art, then I'm sure they'd have something to say about that. In the same way, disease processes facilitate art. You know, when I did my placement at uni, I met someone who was an amazing sort of violinist, and she we had a chat just like med students do with patients, and spoke about what had happened to bipolar. She was going through her really manic phases that was sort of really terrible for her personal life, but at the same time, when she was doing her PhD in her music, she wrote her dissertation, or her sort of key piece, while she was most depressed. That came out in the art. That apparently, you know, from what she was saying, you know, caused her sort of PhD supervisor to break down in tears listening to what she had, and just the music that she had created. So I think there's overlap between disease and the way it sort of affects art. I think there's overlap between science and art. I think what I do maybe isn't an art, especially if you don't do it well. But I think there's
according to which I'm assuming is one of your friends, you're the highest scoring anaesthetist in the east of London. So you clearly do it well.
Yeah. I would say that, you know, there's things like, if you look back at anatomy, and this might be wrong, but I think Da Vinci, sort of some of his like most sort of famous work was, you know, he went to corpses and sort of dissected and tried to sort of draw the human body and all of that stuff. And I think that is an example of how the two merge together, how you can use art to learn more about science. But in terms of medicine as art, it's great. I think you could make it, you know, whatever specialty you do, you could definitely look at it from both viewpoints.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good answer and such interesting points to draw upon. And do you think that, you know, as I'm about to kind of finish my undergraduate medical education training, you've kind of discovered, you know, a creative outlet to help you in such a time of crisis that perhaps, you know, has helped with your resilience? Do you think it's something that should be embedded within like undergraduate curricula, or, you know, even in postgraduate junior doctor training? Like you talk about how you had the support coffee club. Do you think that kind of the arts and art therapy, or just kind of advocating for some sort of creative outlet, big or small, is important in terms of like mental health strategies?
I think advocating for one specific thing, for something like as broad as mental health or coping with work, isn't the right idea. I think different strokes work for different folks. I think whilst this has worked for me, I don't think it would work for a lot of people. And in the same way, you know, various forms of art wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't want to be prescriptive about anything like this because it's so personal. I think people have to find what works for them and what works, and sometimes, yeah, I agree that that's not easy, and sometimes people don't know that something might work for them. So the option should be there, and we all get rewarded extra points on application, having something extra that we do, or extracurricular, whether it's sports or whatever. But it's not formal, I agree, and those options, or having those options in a really accessible way, is appropriate. But I wouldn't sort of say that this is something people had to do. I think
Yeah.
if I had friends that were in a similar position to me or felt low last year, who saw the project I did and were able to find something similar, art or not art, as a route of distraction or a route of positivity, bad, that'd be great. But yeah, I'd struggle to say, this needs to be part of the curriculum.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, no, I'm coming from a very biased place because I did a medical humanities intercalation. So I asked because that's my view. But I think I agree with you. It's so personal, and I think the minute you start kind of making something compulsory, it also sucks the fun out of it. And the minute that there's an assessment involved with something that's really beautiful and creative and personal, it also just sucks the fun out of it. So a fine balance. What I wanted to ask you is, do you have any advice for people who are kind of looking for a hobby and for something that kind of resonates with them? Like, what made you decide photography? I'm going to pick up that camera and go for it. Like, what made you like kind of have the balls to do so when, a lot of hobbies kind of start when you're young, like you wouldn't necessarily feel like you have the confidence to pick up a musical instrument, in your 20s, 30s. What made you have the kind of confidence to say, okay, I want to, pick up a hobby. I haven't done it my whole life. I've not been like some child, photographer. What kind of tips do you have?
I think there's a lot of people who can take photos, and I will be one of them. I also think there's some amazing photographers, and right now we live in a digital age where anyone can pick up their iPhone, really good megapixel camera on it, and take a picture, and it's quite hard sometimes to tell the difference between someone that's done that with a DSLR and spent ages trying. So I think it's harder to be good at photography, but in the same way it's so much more accessible to something like picking up an instrument or sort of taking up an art or taking up a sport. One of the things I'm guilty of is probably not trying new things that are out of my comfort zone, or sort of things that I feel like, I won't be good at that. And I think the reason why it was comfortable doing it with photography is because if I took a bad picture, no one would see it. And it was something I could do with just alone in solitude that would make me sort of enjoy things like traveling and even more, and sort of also be able to spend time alone without necessarily feeling alone. So I don't regret it, and I think whenever I've done things that were outside of, because friends have made me, like go to travel to places that I wouldn't necessarily travel to or whatever, I've always come back feeling really positive and excited about similar opportunities again. So I would just say, if you think that you might enjoy something, it's probably worth trying. And the moment you do it, you will at least be glad you tried, or you know a little bit more about yourself, probably. But that's easier said than done. So I'm definitely not preaching that, but I would say that only good will come of it.
Amazing. No, I think that's such good advice, especially I think with COVID and with lockdown, making you appreciate the little things, like what you can do in the confinement of your four walls, with going out, once a day to get groceries or for a bit of exercise. You really have to learn kind of how to come up with new ways to entertain yourself, because we're not socializing either or going on holiday. So I think it's been a really positive thing that's come out of COVID, that perhaps a lot of people have picked up new hobbies and new things like they never thought they'd do, like painting or photography, cooking, etc. So no, I think that's really good advice. And I just want to say, I think we'll wrap up there, but thank you so much for coming on. It's been really insightful just hearing a bit about your experiences. I haven't wanted to go into the deep and the dark COVID because we want to keep it light on a Wednesday midweek night. And you're living and breathing it every single day. So just thank you so much for all your work you're doing on the front line. I'll be joining you in August, but hoping that things are a bit calmer for when I join.
Yeah, thanks for having me and taking an interest in the project, and to everyone that's listened, that's really kind of you. And good luck for your results tomorrow for where you get to work. You'll do fantastic wherever that is. I'm sure
Thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't mind East London, to be honest. That's my top degree. So you might see me around, who knows? But yeah, thanks again so much. And do you want to tell anyone places that they can find you? Just want them to follow you on your profile.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know, if you're interested and if you like the pictures and want to see more, then at Priyan, it's Priyan being my name and me trying to be clever with it is at Priyan. So please do follow. But there's also some really good pages that do a similar thing and that on the topic are, you know, someone that's been really supportive is someone who suffers a patient from long COVID. And I think her handle is _Corona Diary, and you know, there's loads of interesting projects out there. So whether it be this or something else, there's loads on Instagram in terms of creative outlets. So yeah, hopefully people.
Amazing. Well, thanks a million. Have